My wife cheated on me with our neighbor, then secretly transferred $250, $0 of our savings into his account during the divorce. Now she's claiming I stole the money to fight over the house we've lived in for 15 years. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, writing about how my wife, Jessica, turned out to be cheating on me with our neighbor, Mark. Honestly, I never thought she'd do something so blatant, especially not after 15 years of marriage. But it all unraveled so fast, and now I'm left trying to piece together how I missed all the signs. The wildest part. It all came crashing down the day I found out she secretly transferred $250, $0 out of our savings account into Mark's account during the divorce process. Yeah, she's claiming I stole the money now, trying to turn everything around on me. Let me start from the beginning, because this isn't some story I wanted to tell. It's just how it happened, how I got blindsided, and how I'm now trying to figure out if I even knew my wife at all. Jessica and I met in college, fell in love, and got married right after graduation. We built a life together, or at least I thought we did. She was always a little bitchy and sharp-tongued, but I figured that was just her personality. She was gorgeous. Blonde hair, green eyes, the kind of woman other guys looked at. I was proud to be her husband. We bought a house in a quiet suburb, and for a long time everything seemed perfect. We had 2 kids, a dog, a nice life. But over the last couple of years I started noticing subtle changes. She'd be more secretive about her phone, hiding it when I walked into the room. She'd cancel plans last minute, say she was busy at work when I knew she was. Small things, but enough to make me suspicious. I brushed it off at first, thinking maybe I was just paranoid or imagining things. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Then came the night I found her. Phone open on the kitchen table. I saw a message from someone named Mark that said, "Can't wait to see you tonight, babe." My stomach dropped. I remember staring at it for a long time, trying to process what I was reading. She told me she was working late that night, but here was proof she'd been with someone else. I didn't confront her right then. I was too stunned, too angry. I just took a screenshot, put her phone back, and tried to play it cool. A few days later, I decided to dig deeper. I installed a tracking app on her phone just to see where she was going. I didn't want to believe she was cheating, but I needed proof. And sure enough, her location showed her driving to Mark's house almost every evening. I saw her going in and out, sometimes for hours. She'd come back looking fresh, like she just had a shower. I felt sick. I couldn't believe the woman I trusted, the woman I'd shared everything with, was sneaking around behind my back. Then the financial stuff started to come to light. I noticed our savings account was fluctuating strangely. Over the past 3 months, a total of $250, $0 had been transferred out in small chunks, but I couldn't trace who was receiving it. I called the bank, and they told me the transfers were made through an online portal, no questions asked. I begged for details, but they couldn't give me much without a court order. I felt like I was hitting a wall. That money was supposed to be for our kids' college fund, for our future. Instead, she was funneling it into Mark's account, probably to support her affair or maybe even to run away with him. It all hit me like a freight train. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I started questioning everything, her love, our marriage, whether I ever truly knew her at all. I was furious, betrayed, humiliated. How could she do this to me, to us? We had everything, security, stability, and she was throwing it all away for some guy who probably thought he was getting a trophy wife. The worst part. She kept lying when I confronted her. When I finally sat her down and asked about Mark, she spun some ridiculous story. Said he was just a friend helping her with some projects, that I was paranoid and overreacting. She called me jealous, insecure. But I saw her sweat, saw the panic in her eyes when I pressed her about the transfers. She denied everything about the money, claiming I was just accusing her because I was upset. I wanted to believe her, I really did, but I knew better. I had proof, screenshots, location data, bank statements, and she was lying through her teeth. That's when I realized I was in deep. Not just because she was cheating, but because she'd been stealing from us. our savings, our future, all for this affair. And now she's trying to spin it like I'm the bad guy, claiming I stole the money to fight over the house we've lived in for 15 years. That's her latest lie. She's trying to make me out to be the villain, just like she's always been, bitchy, manipulative, and a master at twisting everything to her favor. I don't know what's worse, the betrayal, the lies, or the fact that I'm now sitting here trying to figure out what to do next. All I know is I never thought I'd be the guy whose wife cheated, stole from him, and then blamed him for. The fallout. It's a nightmare I can't wake up from. After discovering all of this, I felt like my world was shattering. I mean, I had suspected something for a while, but actually seeing the proof, her sneaking around with Mark, the money disappearing from our account, was like a punch to the gut. The anger was overwhelming, but underneath it all, there was this deep, gnawing hurt. I couldn't believe I'd been blind for so long, that I'd trusted her with everything, and she'd been playing me for a fool. The night I confronted her was a mess. I sat her down in the living room, my hands trembling as I showed her the evidence I'd collected. Her face twisted into this bitchy smirk like she thought she was clever. She looked at me, rolled her eyes, and said, "Oh, please, you're overreacting. Mark is just helping me with some home repairs. You're always so paranoid and insecure, it's exhausting." That's when I lost it. I told her I knew about the affair, about the money transfer, everything. Her reaction. She laughed, a cold, dismissive laugh, and said I was crazy, that I was imagining things. She denied everything, said, "Mark was just a friend and the money. You're making that up because you're jealous and insecure." But I wasn't buying it. I could see the lies in her eyes, the way she kept shifting her story, and I knew her well enough to know when she was bullshitting me. She tried to guilt me, said I was a terrible husband, that I never paid enough attention to her. She even threw in the classic line, "You're just mad because I'm prettier than any woman you'll ever have." That was her way of trying to turn the tables, like I was the one at fault, but I didn't care about her insults. I was just trying to hold it together, trying not to break down in front of her. That night, I went to bed feeling numb, like I'd been hit by a truck. I kept replaying everything in my head, the sneaking around, the money, her lies. I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the future, about what I should do now. Part of me wanted to just walk away, cut my losses, and forget she ever existed. But another part of me was enraged. I wanted justice. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done. And I knew I had to do something about that money, because that was the real betrayal. Not just the affair, but the fact that she'd stolen our savings, our security, and then tried to pin it on me. In the days that followed, I started to dig into her phone, her emails, anything I could get my hands on. I wanted to find out if there was more she wasn't telling me. I also contacted a lawyer just to see what my options were if I decided to go through with a divorce. I was furious that she could do this, and I was determined to get to the bottom of it. The more I looked, the more I realized she'd been planning this for a while. There were strange bank transfers, secret passwords, and even some suspicious messages with Mark where they discussed getting away together and starting fresh somewhere else. I felt betrayed on every level. My wife had lied, cheated, stolen, and now she was trying to manipulate the situation to her advantage. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was overreacting, and that I was just jealous of Mark. I couldn't believe her audacity. This woman who once told me she loved me was now spinning lies and trying to paint herself as the wronged party. It was such a sick, twisted game, and I was caught right in the middle of it. I realized I couldn't trust her anymore, not even a little bit. Every word, every smile, every excuse was now suspect. I felt like I was living in some bad nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The shock was settling into a kind of numbness, but underneath, the rage was simmering. I wanted her to pay for what she'd done, especially for the money she stole. That $250, $0, wasn't just some number. It was our future, our kids' college fund, our safety net if something went wrong. And she had taken it for her own selfish reasons. Now, I've reached a point where I can't see a way forward with her. I've decided I need to protect what's left of my sanity and my future. I can't stay with someone who lies and cheats so effortlessly. But I also know I need to be smart about this. If she's willing to steal from us and lie so easily, what else could she be capable of? I've started gathering evidence, talking to a lawyer, and I'm preparing for the worst. Because at this point, I don't trust her with anything anymore, not even the truth. It's a mess, and honestly, I don't know how I'm going to get through it. But I do know one thing: I'm not going to let her get away with it. Not without a fight. After I got over the initial shock and anger, I started to realize just how deep the rabbit hole went. The more I dug, the more I found evidence that Jessica had been planning this betrayal for months, maybe even longer. It wasn't just a spur-of-the-moment thing. No, she had meticulously orchestrated the entire affair with Mark and the theft of our savings. That realization hit me like a sledgehammer. She'd been lying to my face, pretending everything was fine, while secretly plotting her escape and her new life with him. The morning after I confronted her, I stayed up all night going through her emails, texts, and bank statements. I was looking for any clue, anything that could give me a clearer picture of what she'd been up to, and I found it. Hidden in a folder buried deep in her email account, there were messages between her and Mark, discussing getting away and starting fresh somewhere else. They were talking about a plan to disappear, to leave everything behind. The worst part: she'd been sending money to Mark's account gradually over the past 3 months, with the total now reaching that $250, $0. She transferred it in tiny chunks so it wouldn't raise suspicion, and she'd done it all while pretending to be the loving wife I'd known. I also found evidence that she'd been seeing Mark behind my back long before I suspected anything. Secret rendezvous, late-night meetings, and even a few hotel receipts. She lied about everything, even about her whereabouts. The woman I thought I knew was a complete stranger, capable of deception I couldn't even comprehend. It was like I'd been living with a double life, and I'd only just scratched the surface. Meanwhile, Jessica kept insisting she was innocent, that Mark was just helping her with some home repairs and business ideas. She told me I was insecure, jealous, and paranoid. She claimed that I was imagining things, that I was overreacting because I didn't want to admit she was right about everything. I couldn't believe her. Her lies were so obvious now, and her attitude was so bitchy, like she thought she could just talk her way out of it. She even accused me of being a deadbeat husband, of neglecting her and the kids. But I knew the truth. She was the one neglecting her marriage, neglecting the family, and instead chasing some fantasy with Mark. What made everything worse was her attempt to manipulate the situation legally. She started claiming I stolen the money, trying to turn the tables on me. She said I was trying to sabotage her, that I was the one who had been secretly siphoning funds from our account. She even hired a lawyer, one who was sympathetic to her story, and began to paint me as the bad guy. She's playing the victim, as always, while I'm left to pick up the pieces. I felt helpless and furious at the same time. I was furious because she'd betrayed me, betrayed our marriage, and stolen from our future. I was helpless because I didn't know how to stop her from spinning her web of lies. I wanted to expose her, to make her face the consequences of her actions, but I also knew I had to be careful. She was smart, manipulative, and she knew how to twist everything in her favor. I decided I had to act fast. I contacted a lawyer I found through a friend, someone who specialized in marital and financial disputes. I told him everything I'd uncovered: her affair, the stolen money, her plans to run away with Mark. The lawyer warned me that Jessica might try to hide or even destroy evidence, so I needed to be discreet. I also started to gather my own evidence: screenshots, bank statements, copies of her messages. I wanted to be prepared for the fight ahead. At the same time, I reached out to the bank to put a freeze on any further transfers. I didn't want her to move more money or try to cover her tracks. I also scheduled a meeting with a financial investigator to trace the money and see if I could recover some of what she'd taken. I was determined to get to the bottom of this, no matter what it took. The most unsettling part: her calm, bitchy attitude. She kept acting like she was the victim, like I was the one causing all the problems. She'd call me paranoid, accuse me of spying on her, and then turn around and pretend everything was fine. But I knew better now. I saw her for what she really was: a liar, a manipulator, a thief. And I was finally starting to see that I couldn't trust her anymore. Not with my heart, not with our money, not with anything. I kept asking myself how I'd missed all the signs. How could I have been so blind? I was furious at her, but I was also hurt. Hurt that someone I loved so much could do this to me, to our family. It's a sinking feeling, like your entire life is built on a lie. Every moment I thought we shared, every memory now feels tainted. I don't know if I'll ever trust her again or if I'll ever be able to look at her the same way. All I know is I'm not going down without a fight. I'm going to make sure she pays for what she's done, even if it means tearing everything apart to do it. The days that followed were a whirlwind of chaos and planning. I couldn't sleep, couldn't focus. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smirk, heard her lies. I knew I had to act fast, but I also had to be smart. Jessica was sharp. She knew how to cover her tracks, and she had a way of turning every situation to her advantage. I couldn't just confront her again without solid evidence and a plan. I spent hours on the phone with my lawyer, trying to figure out how to block her from transferring any more money. We discussed filing for an emergency injunction to freeze her accounts, and I authorized an investigation into where all that stolen cash had gone. I also contacted a private investigator, someone recommended by a friend, to see if there was anything else she was hiding. I needed to know if there were more secret accounts, hidden assets, or anything else that could give me leverage. Meanwhile, I kept digging into her phone and emails. I found even more proof, messages with Mark where they discussed meeting up, their plans to disappear, and her detailed instructions for transferring money. I also discovered she'd been talking about selling the house which we'd lived in for 15 years to help fund her new life with Mark. That was the final nail in the coffin. She was planning to leave everything behind, our home, our life, everything we built together. I had to confront her again, but this time I was ready. I called her into the living room, told her I knew everything and that I had evidence of her plans. Her bitchy attitude flared up immediately, like she thought she could talk her way out of it. She looked at me with that dismissive smirk and said, "You're overreacting. You always blow things out of proportion. Mark is just a friend and I don't know what you're talking about with the money. You're paranoid as usual." I didn't buy her bullshit anymore. I laid out everything I'd found, including the bank statements, the messages, the evidence from the investigator. She started to panic, her eyes darting around like a trapped animal. That's when she started to lie even more, saying she'd only transferred some of the money because she was desperate, that Mark was helping her get back on her feet, and that I had no right to accuse her of anything. I felt a mixture of rage and heartbreak. How could she be so callous, so manipulative? I told her I was done listening to her lies, that I was going to take her to court and get everything sorted out legally. I also told her that I'd be reporting the theft to the bank and the police. Her face twisted into a sneer and she spat. "You're just trying to ruin me. Mark and I are done with your lies. You're a jealous, insecure man who can't handle the truth." I couldn't believe her audacity. She was trying to turn me into the villain while she sat there, the real criminal. I knew I had to stay calm, even though inside I was boiling. I told her she was done, that I'd file for divorce, and that I was going to fight for everything she'd stolen. I also warned her that if she tried to hide or destroy any evidence, I'd have her arrested. She just scoffed, then stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her like a petulant child. That night, I sat alone in the dark thinking about everything. I felt betrayed, angry, and exhausted. I kept replaying her lies, her manipulations, and the fact that she'd stolen from us. That money was supposed to secure our future, and now she was trying to spin it as if I was the thief. I couldn't believe I married someone capable of this level of deception. It was like waking up from a nightmare. I knew I couldn't just sit around anymore. I had to be proactive. I finalized the paperwork for the divorce, something I'd been putting off because I loved her, or at least I thought I did. But now, love was the last thing on my mind. I just wanted justice. I wanted her to face the consequences of her actions. I also started to look into legal ways to recover the stolen money, even if it meant going after her assets or pressing charges if necessary. That's when I realized something else. This wasn't just about money or betrayal. It was about the betrayal of everything I believed in: trust, loyalty, the vows we took. Jessica had turned into someone I hardly recognized. The woman I'd loved, the woman I'd shared my life with had become someone capable of lying, cheating, stealing, and manipulating her way out of accountability. And I was left to pick up the pieces. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I do know I can't stay silent. I've got to fight for what's right, for my dignity, and for whatever is left of the life we once had. I've learned that people can surprise you, sometimes in the worst ways, and that trust is fragile, very fragile. And once it's broken, rebuilding it is almost impossible. All I can do now is prepare for the storm ahead and hope that justice somehow will be served. The legal process moved quickly once I handed over all my evidence. My lawyer was relentless, filing for a temporary restraining order, freezing her accounts, and subpoenaing all her financial records. Jessica, of course, was furious. She tried to spin it as me trying to ruin her, claiming I was just jealous and paranoid. Her words, her bitchy attitude, it all made me realize how deeply she'd twisted everything to her advantage. She's always been good at that, lying, manipulating, playing the victim, so I knew I had to be even more thorough. Meanwhile, I kept digging. I hired a private investigator who found that Jessica had opened a new account under a fake name, probably to hide the stolen money. She transferred a chunk of it there, and I was told it was just a matter of time before she tried to move it again. I had to act fast. I also discovered she'd been talking to Mark about how she could disappear with the kids if she had to, and how she'd be free once she got the house and the money. That hit me hard. She was planning to leave everything behind, including her own children, to be with him. One day, I caught her trying to access the house's safe deposit box. I was home unexpectedly, and she was frantically trying to hide something. I confronted her right then. Her bitchy smirk returned, and she spun some bullshit about needing to check on her jewelry or some other excuse. But I knew better. I demanded she open it, and when she hesitated, I forced the issue. Inside, I found some of the most damning evidence: receipts, fake IDs, and a stack of cash she'd hidden away. She looked like a cornered animal, furious and defeated at the same time. That was the moment I realized she was planning to run. She was ready to leave everything behind, our house, the kids, our life, and start fresh with Mark somewhere far away. I couldn't let that happen. I knew I had to stop her before she vanished with the money and the kids. I contacted the police, and they advised me to get an emergency custody order for the children, just to be safe. I didn't want to tear my family apart, but I also couldn't risk losing everything I'd worked for. Jessica's reaction to all this was pure bitchiness. She accused me of trying to control her, called me crazy, and said I was dangerous for going after her like this. She even tried to turn the kids against me, telling them I was harsh and trying to ruin their family. It was sickening. Seeing her manipulate the situation, trying to paint herself as the victim, made me more determined to fight for my kids and for the truth. The court hearings were intense. Jessica showed up with her lawyer, trying to argue that I was an unfit father, that I was trying to control her, and that the money was mine because I worked hard for it. I presented all the evidence: bank records, messages, the investigators' reports. It was clear she was lying, trying to spin everything to her favor. The judge saw through it, thankfully, and granted me temporary custody of the kids, as well as an order to freeze her assets. But the most shocking thing: Jessica's lawyer filed a countersuit claiming I had stolen the money, that I was the one secretly siphoning funds, and that I was trying to sabotage her new life. She even accused me of abuse, something I'd never even come close to doing. It was her way of deflecting attention from her own crimes. I was furious. I knew then that this was going to be a long, dirty fight. Throughout all this, I couldn't help but feel a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief that I was finally getting some clarity, that I had evidence to fight back. Heartbreak because I realized I'd lost my wife, someone I'd loved for so many years, who had turned into someone capable of betrayal, theft, and manipulation. Every day was a new battle, trying to keep my head above water while she fought dirty, trying to destroy me in every way she could. And then there was the money. The stolen $250, $0. I was determined to recover it, to hold her accountable. I hired forensic accountants and investigators to trace every dollar, every transfer. The hope was to freeze her assets completely, maybe even get some of the money back. But I knew that, no matter what, the damage was done. I'd never see that money again without a fight, and even then it might not be enough. Looking back, I realize how naive I was, how I believed in the vows, in her love, in our future. But Jessica showed me the truth. She was a liar and a thief. And I learned that sometimes the most shocking betrayals come from the people you trust the most. All I can do now is keep fighting, stay strong, and hope that someday I'll find peace again. Because right now, it feels like I'm fighting not just for my money or my kids, but for the very pieces of myself I thought I knew. The courtroom was a battlefield. I knew Jessica was going to pull out. All the stops, more lies, more manipulation, anything to save herself. Her bitchy smirk was still there, but I saw through it now. I'd gathered enough evidence to make sure she couldn't wiggle out of this. The judge listened carefully, and I could tell she saw right through Jessica's attempts to spin her story. When the judge finally ruled, it was a small victory: temporary custody of the kids, the freezing of her assets, and a court order for her to produce all documents related to the stolen money. But the real fight was far from over. Jessica's lawyer immediately filed appeals, pushing to overturn everything. She was trying to drag this out, hopping to wear me down or buy her more time. I knew her game. She was a master at playing the victim, always shifting blame, always lying. Every day I felt like I was in a war, an emotional, financial, and legal war, and I was determined not to lose. The most painful part was watching her try to manipulate the kids. She'd tell them I was trying to control her, that I was jealous, and that she was the one who loved them most. It made me sick. I was fighting to keep my relationship with them, fighting to prove I was the stable, loving father they needed. I hired a child psychologist to help us, hopping to reinforce my role as their dad and counter her damaging lies. It was the only thing keeping me going, knowing I had a chance to protect them from her twisted narrative. Meanwhile, I worked tirelessly on recovering the stolen money. I coordinated with forensic accountants, law enforcement, and the bank to trace every dollar, every transfer, every hidden account, every fake ID. It was a slow, exhausting process, but I refused to give up. I knew Jessica's entire plan was to run away with Mark, start fresh somewhere else, and leave everything behind, including the money she'd stolen from us. I wanted justice, not just for me, but for our family. That money was supposed to secure our future, and I was going to fight to get it back. There were moments of despair, sure. Days when I wondered if I'd ever see a normal life again, if I'd ever trust someone again. The betrayal cut so deep I sometimes felt like giving up. But then I remembered the kids, my reason for fighting, my reason to keep going. I reminded myself that I had to be strong, not just for me, but for them. Jessica might have turned into a manipulative, lying thief, but I was still standing. I was still fighting. In the end, I learned a lot about trust, betrayal, and resilience. I learned that sometimes the people you love the most can hurt you the worst, but you have to pick yourself up and keep going. I realized that justice isn't always immediate, but if you stay honest and persistent, you can eventually bring some semblance of peace back into your life. Jessica's lies and betrayal hurt, but they didn't break me. I found strength I didn't know I had, and I refused to let her win. Now, I'm in the process of rebuilding. The divorce is final, and I've started therapy to deal with the emotional scars. I've also begun the long process of healing and trusting again. I know I'll never forget what she did, but I also know I won't let it define me. The money is still being recovered, and I'm hopeful I'll get most of it back, enough to start fresh, to give my kids the life they deserve. Looking back, I realize how naive I was to trust blindly, but I also learned that even in the darkest moments, there's a way forward. Sometimes, you have to fight for what's right, even if it costs everything you have. And sometimes, the greatest strength comes from simply refusing to give up. Jessica's betrayal was one of the hardest things I've ever gone through, but it taught me the importance of standing tall, of fighting for your truth, and of never letting someone else's lies define who you are. That's what I'll carry with me from now on. an unbreakable resolve to rebuild and move forward, no matter what.